Dear students, you are watching IIT PAL series of biology and I, Rikisha Bhaumik, PGT Biology at Kendriya Vidyalaya Sector 2 RK Puram is assisting you in learning the concepts of evolution. In our last two sessions, we have completed a major part of the evolution, and in this session, we will be learning more about some new concepts. In this session, I will try, since this is the last and the final session of the evolution chapter, I will try to fill the gaps in learning, if any, and would give you a holistic view of this chapter. So, let us first have a quick recap of what we have done in the previous two sessions. So, with the help of this concept map, you can see that we can recapitulate what concepts we covered. Evolution, first of all, we will start with the origin of life. Since evolution deals with the changes in the life forms, first we will start with the origin of life. For learning about the origin of life, we will go back and trace the origin of universe. As I told you in the first session that universe began about 15 to 20 billion years back, and the most plausible theory was the Big Bang theory. It was followed by the expansion of universe, condensation of gases like hydrogen and helium, leading to the formation of many galaxies, solar system and earth, which is a part of the solar system. The hypothesis which explains this is the nebular hypothesis. Then we also traced how the first life form evolved. Earth evolved about 4.5 billion years ago and the first life forms evolved 4 billion years ago. The most plausible theory which explains how the life form was formed is the theory of chemical evolution. It states that the conditions on primitive earth was favorable enough to initiate a chemical reaction which will lead to the formation of first cellular forms. This theory was given by Oparin of Russia and Haldane of England. The experimental evidence for this theory of chemical evolution came from Stanley Miller and Harold Urey, who created a condition similar to the primitive earth under a laboratory setup, and they could actually synthesize amino acids, nucleic acids and sugars from this experiment. So, it was convincingly proved that the first life which arose on earth was due to chemical evolution. But we also know about other theories for origin of life which came before the theory of chemical evolution. We discussed it briefly in our first session. They were the theory of special creation, theory of pangenesis and theory of spontaneous generation. Under theory of special creation, we discussed that it was the most oldest theory which explained that earth was formed in 6 days. Theory of panspermia said that there are spores on other planets which incidentally landed on our earth and life was originated from those spores. And the third, which is the theory of spontaneous generation, said that life could originate from gradually from the non-living matter, but it was also discarded by the experiment of Louis Pasteur. So, the theory which we believe in is the theory of biogenesis, which is preceded by chemical evolution. Chemical evolution explain how the first cellular life originated, and the biogenesis explain how life has since been evolving after the first life arose. Life arises from the pre-existing life forms. Then we have discussed the origin of life, the theories for origin of life. Once the life is formed, we will deal with the biological evolution. I told you that biological evolution majorly deals with how life forms has changed over a period of time, and the theories which explain this were given by certain eminent scientists. The first logical explanation for its mechanism came from Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck. This theory is also known as theory of use and disuse of organ, or the theory of acquired characteristics, theory of inheritance of acquired characteristic. The postulates of Lamarck was that an organism has need resulting from the need, there can be modification of the old organs and new organs may be formed. If an organ is used continuously, it will highly develop. On the other hand, if an organ is not used at all, it will lead to its degeneration. This Lamarck theory can be very well remembered by the example of a giraffe who had short necks in the earlier time because he had lot of grasses to graze over, but with time when the grasses became scarce in the environment, the giraffes, they tend to stretch their necks, and this stretching of the necks over a period of time is said to explain by Lamarck as the theory of use of an organ and disuse of the organ. However, it could not explain many things and there were many criticisms for this theory. So, it is not anymore used as a plausible theory of evolution. Then the most plausible theory was given by Charles Darwin, the great naturalist, who went to Galapagos Island, who went to sea voyage, explored the world and made many interesting observations about evolution. The theory of Darwin is known as the theory of natural selection. The work he published was Origin of Species by Natural Selection. Natural selection refers to, as you may remember, that it is the process by which the organisms have variations and those variations which help them in adapting to the environment. These variations which are giving a survival advantages, these are selected by the nature. The nature select only those characteristics which are well suited to its change, and so it will lead to reproductive fitness. These were the main postulate of Darwin's theory. Darwin, the four main postulate which we have already covered about Darwinism included the survival for existence, fitness, reproductive fitness. All these are the key concept of the Darwin theory. Then this Darwin's theory of natural selection is one of the unifying theory of biology. We believe this to be true and we have also seen with the help of other sources that whatever postulates have been given under this theory are correct. Then moving on to one more scientist, Hugo de Vries, who told about mutation as a cause of variation, as a cause of evolution. He said that contrary to what Darwin told about natural selection, and he told that Darwin told that natural selection is a slow and steady process, Hugo de Vries said that mutation is a sudden change and creates variation in the population leading to evolution. So, these were the three major theories about evolution, and the most we believe in is the Darwin's theory. We also acknowledge Hugo de Vries' mutation theory as the means of variation. Then, how do we know that evolution is taking place? Yes, we have evidences for evolution, and these evidences have come from varied sources. For instance, paleontology, it is the study of fossils. The fossils are the remains of the dead organisms which used to live in the past. So, by finding the fossils, if we happen to discover a fossil, we can find out its age by the method of radioactive dating technique or by correlating it with the geological strata in which the fossil has been found. So, accordingly, we can determine the age of the fossil and correlate the organisms which were found at that particular period. Then morphology and anatomy also give us the evidences of evolution. The homologous organs and the analogous organs are covered under this. Homologous organs are those organs which have same origin, same pattern of arrangement, but they have different function because they have adapted to different environmental conditions. On the other hand, analogous organs are those organs which may superficially appear similar because of the same kind of environmental condition, but their origin and their pattern of arrangement is very different from each other. So, under morphology, which is the study of external features, and anatomy, which is the study of internal structure of an organism, we can also find the evidences of evolution through the study of homologous organs and analogous organ. The next evidence comes from biochemistry. Biochemistry deals with the metabolic reaction, the biomolecules which are present inside the organism. These biomolecules can be compared, and those biomolecules which are more similar in organisms, if the biomolecules are similar in organism, they are showing similar properties, they are showing similar structure, that shows that they are related evolutionary. Embryology is the study of embryos. In the embryonic stages, similarities can be closely seen. If the organism of different groups are showing embryonic stages very similar to each other, if there is a resemblance, then we can conclude that these organisms are closely related. Connecting links are those organisms which are connecting one group to the another, and in this they show the features of both the groups. For example, viruses are said to be connecting link between living organisms and non-living organism. Euglena is also said to be a connecting link between plants and animals. Similarly, balanoglossus is a connecting link between chordates and non-chordates. Again, similar to the concept of connecting links, missing links are those links which are not found anymore. They are the transitional fossil form which again show features of both the groups. Vestigial organs are those organs which have become rudimentary, but they were larger and functional in our ancestor. So, the vestigial organs also give us an evidence of the process of evolution. Then direct observation. There are many processes which we can directly observe and which give us an evidence of evolution. For example, man has been doing plant and animal hybridization programs and creating different breeds of plants and animals. This is a direct observation of evolution. In a period of 100 years, man has successfully produced many different breeds. So, if man can produce different breeds in a matter of 100 years, can't nature and the forces of natural selection not produce evolution or not show evolution? Similarly, direct observation can also be seen by the activities of man, which is known as anthropogenic evolution. The evolution which has been speeded up by the activities of man is known as anthropogenic evolution. Under this, the most important concept which you need to remember is about industrial melanism. Industrial melanism refers to a process by which the peppered moth, Biston betularia, the frequency of the peppered moth started showing a change. Industrial revolution was brought about in England in 1900. Before the industrial revolution, the white variety of the Biston betularia was more prevalent, but after industrial revolution, it was seen that the white moth declined, whereas the dark moth started increasing. Why? What was the cause? I told you earlier that the white moth was more in number before the industrial revolution, because there was no pollution in the surrounding. The bark were also lighter in color, the bark of the trees on which the moth could camouflage itself and protect itself from its predator. Lichens was also profusely growing over there. Lichen is a very good pollution indicator. If there is pollution, if the quantity of pollution is more, if the level of pollution is more, then lichens do not grow in such area. So, after industrial revolution, as you may be guessing that there was more pollution, and because of the pollution the barks also became darker, and also the lichens they started disappearing, because of which the dark colored moth was selected by the nature because of its advantageous variation to cope with the changing environment, and we see the phenomena of industrial melanism. Similarly, the resistance to antibiotics and the resistance toward chemicals, pesticide by the respective organisms is also a clear cut evidence of evolution, which has been speeded up by the activities of man. So, these are the evidences of evolution, and these are ample evidences. If such a question comes in your paper to elaborate about the evidences of evolution, I am pretty confident that you will be able to cite these reasons. Then we also discussed about the types of evolution. Evolution can be of two types, divergent evolution and convergent evolution. In divergent evolution, as the name suggests, the evolution starts from a point, from a common ancestor, and it radiates to other geographical areas, and according to those areas the organism, they tend to change in order to cope with the environment. So, divergent evolution leads to adaptive radiation. In order to adapt, they show changes, but they also are related with homology, because they had the common ancestor, and because of the common ancestor their origin and pattern of arrangement is similar, but the superficial adaptation is different. On the other hand, convergent evolution is just the opposite of divergent evolution. It can also be known as parallel evolution. When in a particular place there are many adaptive radiation, it is known as convergent evolution. Again, as the name suggests, convergent evolution will lead to convergence at a particular place. That means unrelated organisms may be combined, may be unified by a particular environment which requires similar kind of adaptation. So, when they adapt, when the differently related or the organisms which are not related to each other, they come to a place and they have to adapt to the environmental condition, and this type of evolution which occurs over a period of time is known as convergent evolution. So, with this quick recap, I think you are in a better position to understand the concepts of evolution, and we will put one step forward to our we will go one step forward to this. Let me quote one thing here, that evolution is rarely a process of evolution is rarely a straight line process from one species to species. Instead, it is like a tree with many branches. Some of its branches may give rise to new branches, and some may also become dead end. So, rather than the general belief that evolution is a ladder like thing or evolution goes like a straight line process, it is not true. Evolution is rather like a tree with many branches. These branches may give rise to new branches, and some of the branches may end into dead parts. So, with this we will further try to understand the concepts. I will today explain you about the concept of speciation, followed by HardyWeinberg Equilibrium, and then a brief account of evolution. We will also trace the evolutionary history of man, the origin and evolution of man. So, first coming to speciation. Coming to the concept of speciation, first of all we should know how to define a species. So, species, can we say that a group of similar organism in a population is a species? Yes, but not entirely. A species is actually a group of organism which may appear to be similar, but the most important criteria for being called a species is that they should potentially interbreed in nature. So, we can define a species as a group of similar organisms or members of a population which can potentially interbreed in nature. That means that the most important criteria for being called a species is that their ability to interbreed and produce their offspring. So, here we can highlight this word interbreed. Species are those group of organisms which are able to interbreed potentially in nature, and the process of formation of a new species the process of formation of a new species can be known as speciation, right? So, this species can be formed, for example, this is species 1, and if it forms a species 2 over a period of time because of accumulation of variations. You know that variations keep on accumulating with generation. So, because of the accumulation of variation, species 1 can lead to the formation of a species 2 which is entirely different from its ancestor. But this type of evolution is rather rare. As I said in the introductory lines that evolution is rarely a straight line process from one species to species 2, but it is more commonly a process which resemble a tree and it give rise to different lineages. So, like there will be branching and there can be species 1 and species 2 and this is the species 3 can be formed. But how? What has happened over a period of time so that this species has emerged from this species and this one also, but they are no more able to reproduce. In order to explain this, I will try to give you the concept of reproductive isolation. Reproductive isolation means a species can be formed, a new species can emerge from a group of homogeneous population if there is reproductive isolation. And how can reproductive isolation occur? By the method of geographical isolation. If the organism have a geographical barrier between them which is making them isolate from each other and they are not interbreeding with over a period of time, they will show reproductive isolation. For instance, if I give you an example of a population in which there are red colored organisms, in this population there are certain variants, these are the two variants. Suppose a river forms between this population, this homogeneous set of population, a river comes in between, a barrier comes in between. With over a period of time, what will happen that this land will get separated and this land will get separated. There will be a geographical barrier between them and this species, these organisms will evolve to become a different organism, and with over a period of time they will not be able to reproduce, they will not be able to interbreed, and then we say that two different species have been formed. So, I hope that the concept of speciation is quite clear to you. Speciation refers to the formation of a new species from the homogeneous population of existing species, and this arises because of the process of reproductive isolation. If they are kept apart for a period of time and they are not able to interbreed, they will over a period of time evolve in their respective areas and convert into different species. Even after this period of time, if they are brought together, they will not anymore reproduce. So, this was reproductive isolation. Now, moving to the next topic, which is the Hardy-Weinberg Equilibrium. This is a very important topic of this chapter, Hardy-Weinberg Equilibrium. First of all, let us try to understand this equilibrium. It was given by G. H. Hardy and W. Weinberg. By equilibrium, we mean genetic equilibrium. Genetic equilibrium. You know, equilibrium is a state which remains in balance so that there is no change. So, genetic equilibrium can be understood by further understanding about the gene pool. What is a gene pool? Gene pool is the sum total of all the genes and their alleles in a given population. For example, if we take the blood group in humans, we know that the gene which is responsible for blood group is I, and it has the different alleles IA, IB and I. When we are doing population studies, we can very well observe all these three alleles. But we know that since in an organism, in a diploid organism, only two alleles can be present, the combinations which can occur are IA, IB, IA small I, IAB small I. So, these can be the combinations which can occur. So, the purpose of telling you this was what is a gene pool. Gene pool is the sum total of all the genes and their alleles in a given population. Now, this equilibrium states that the frequency of occurrence of all the alleles of a gene or a loci, the frequency of occurrence of all the alleles of a gene or a loci remains stable and constant from generation to generation. What does this suggest? That all the genes in a population will remain intact, and from one generation to next generation all the alleles of the genes will have the same frequency of occurrence. This is known as genetic equilibrium or Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. This also gives you a mathematical expression to find out the frequency of occurrence of different alleles of a gene. So, how can we find out the different frequencies of the alleles of a gene? If for instance, we are taking a diploid organism in which a gene is represented by two alleles A and small a, the frequency of occurrence of A can be supposed to be P, and the frequency of occurrence of small a can be taken as Q. Now, we know that the frequency of occurrence of A will become P square, because it will be the product of the frequency. A will be Q square, and a heterogeneous set of alleles will have PQ. But since we know that it is a diploid organism, so it will become 2PQ. We have seen the ratio 1:2:1. So, 1 this allele will be in one frequency, this will be AA and the heterogeneous one. Now, since in the equilibrium the frequency of occurrence of all the alleles is constant, we can say that the sum total of all these alleles should be equal to 1, because it remains constant. So, it should be equal to 1. So, it can be expressed in the form of P square plus Q square plus 2PQ is equal to 1, which gives you the binomial expansion for P plus Q whole square is equal to 1. This is how we can represent the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. By using this mathematical expression, we can find out the frequency of occurrence of different alleles. So, do you think that this Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium is possible in nature? Do you think that the genetic pool remains constant over a period of time? No, it is not so. It is not the case, because we know that there are many variations taking place. So, we can say that Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium is an ideal condition. Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium represent an ideal condition where there is no evolutionary change. Since the mathematical expression will help you in finding out the frequency of occurrence of the alleles, if we find that the frequency of alleles, the frequency of occurrence of allele is different from the expected frequency, different from the expected frequency, we can find out the extent of evolution. So, Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium states that the genetic pool remains constant from generation to generation, and he also gave the mathematical expression by which we can find the frequency of occurrence of alleles of different genes. Now, because of this equation, we can also determine the extent to which the frequency differs, and that will also help us in finding out the extent of evolution. So, what does it suggest? The Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium is a very important, is a very good method of determining the evolutionary extent. But as I said that this is not occurring in reality. Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium is not maintained because of certain factors which affect it. What are those factors? Factors which affect Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium? Let us see them. Number 1, there is gene flow or gene migration. Number 2, there is genetic drift. Number 3, there is genetic recombination because of the sexual reproduction. Then there are mutations as told by Hugo de Vries, and there is the process of natural selection. So, these are the 5 factors which can disturb the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. 5 factors which affect Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. So, let us discuss them in detail. Gene flow or migration refers to the migration of a particular gene from one population to another population, and this can occur because the organism has moved from this population to the next population, or it can be done by nature also, the forces of nature. Genetic drift is also similar to gene flow, but it actually occurs accidentally, and it also occurs in a small population. The effect of genetic drift is seen only in small population. You must be remembering that in class 10th you read about evolution, and there were examples, very simple examples to explain these terms. Genetic drift, the beetle population was there, and in the beetle population there were red beetles and green beetles. Two populations were there, red beetles, a homogeneous population but comprising of variants. The green were more in number. Accidentally an elephant put his feet over this, and this population got finished, and only this population could perpetuate, the green one. So, there was a change in the gene frequency, and this is known as genetic drift. Genetic recombination refers to the recombination mechanism which occurs during the process of gametogenesis. There is crossing over in the prophase 1 of meiosis 1, leading to variations. Mutation is a sudden change in the gene or a chromosome which can lead to variation. Natural selection is a mechanism operating in nature by which nature selects only those variants which are more suited to cope with the environment. So, these are the 5 factors which affect Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. As we have seen that there are 5 factors which will affect Hardy-Weinberg principle. Coming to the last one, which is the natural selection, and you know about the process of natural selection, that the nature will select only those organisms which are in a better condition to adapt to the environment, and they will as a result show reproductive fitness and will be able to produce offsprings. So, with the help of this graph you can see that the normal distribution curve of the frequency of occurrence of traits, here is frequency, and the phenotype It shows a normal distribution curve, the bell shaped curve. But what can happen in one of the modes of natural selection is that there can be a slight favor to a particular trait. A particular trait may be favored by the natural selection, and because of this the graph may shift. The actual graph, which was like this, now it will show a directional change in its peak. We see that the peak has shifted. This type of natural selection is also known as directional selection. And the very good example is that of industrial melanism, where you saw that the peppered moth after industrial revolution showed a favorable drift towards the black winged moth. So, the directional selection helps you in understanding the process of industrial melanism. Next, the second type of selection which you can see is, again we will draw the normal distribution curve. With the x and y axis, frequency and the phenotype. Now, sometime nature will favor those traits which are at the intermediate stage, and the extreme traits will be eliminated. So, there will be a cut from these two ends. Since the extreme traits are being eliminated, so the graph will now become like this. The peak will become narrower, resulting in more number of average traits. Peak becomes narrower, and this kind of natural selection is known as stabilizing natural selection. Stabilizing selection, and the example is in human babies. The weight of human babies, we see that a average weight baby is successful in living, but on the extreme ends the babies usually show mortality rate which is higher than the average baby. The third mode of selection, you can guess what it can be. Yes, you are right. When the normal distribution curve is showing a tendency where not the extreme ends, but the intermediate ones are discarded. The intermediate ones are discarded, and there is a tendency in favor of the traits which are at the extreme ends. So, this graph will become like this. There will be two peak here in favor of the extreme ends, and the example is the butterflies, where we see different forms of butterflies, some which are very beautiful in color and the other which are simple brown colored. This kind of natural selection is known as disrupting selection. Disruptive selection. So, these were the three modes of natural selection. I think by this discussion you are very much clear what is Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, does it exist in nature, and what are those factors which affect it. Now we will move on to the next topic. The next topic deals with the brief account of evolution. So let us try to understand the sequence of evolution of different life forms on this earth. This table shows you the era, time period and the event. Era, Proterozoic era, which was about 2 billion years ago, first cellular form was formed. Try to recall how the chemical evolution took place. The condition on earth was suitable for a chemical reaction to be initiated, and that led to the formation of biomolecules. They polymerized and condensed and formed macromolecules. They formed a membrane around them and could form the first cell. This is a diagram of microsphere which is showing budding and fragmentation. They could form buds and fragmentation like the prokaryotes. The first cell which arose was in water and was unicellular. Later, from unicellular, multicellular forms also arose. Then coming to the next era, which is the Paleozoic era, 500 million years ago, the earth was mostly dominated by the invertebrates. You may be knowing what are the invertebrates. Invertebrates are those organisms which do not have a vertebral column, and starting from the porifera, mollusca, coelenterata, annelida, arthropods, they all come under invertebrates. So there was profusion of invertebrates 500 million years ago. Then 350 million years ago, jawless fishes came into existence, which are put into the group Agnatha. Seaweeds and aquatic plants also arose. This was the time when the plants was also evolving. Plants are said to be the first organism which came to the land. The plants, if we study about the evolution of plant, chlorophyta gave rise to algae-like organisms, algae-like plants, then came the bryophytes, and then came the pteridophytes, which were the first land plants, first land vascular plants. Then the fishes with stout and strong fins were also there, which were amphibious in nature. They could come to the land and then could go back to the water. Certain lobe fins, these are known as lobe fins. These lobe fins were supposed to have extinct from the surface of earth, but recently in 1938 in South Africa, one of the member of lobe fins, coelacanth, was found. This is the picture of coelacanth you can see. Then if we go to the next 250 million years ago, the 250 million years ago, the amphibians started evolving, amphibians started originating, and these amphibians, you can see frogs and salamanders, they are the recent descendants of the amphibians which we can see today. Continuing this to the next, what happened, the next era, which was the Mesozoic era, which was about 200 million years, it was dominated by reptiles. There were many different types of reptiles that time, land reptiles, usually dinosaurs, which were in various sizes, very large, small, different kind of dinosaurs were there on the land. Water reptiles were there, fish-like reptile, this is Ichthyosaurus, who was a fish-like reptile, it had a snout and it had fins also. Then the other reptiles like turtles, tortoises, crocodiles, they evolved later, and these are the most recent descendants of the reptiles. So we are showing these in the form of a branches, because we know that evolution is not a process, is not a straight line process, but it is like a tree having different branches. The biggest dinosaur which was present at that time was Tyrannosaurus rex, who was 20 feet in height and had dagger like teeth. But what happened in 65 million years ago? About 65 million years ago, there was a sudden disappearance of dinosaurs. Giant ferns also fell down, and they have turned into the coal deposits which we are using today. So there was some changes in this period. We do not know much about it. There was some suggest that it was a natural catastrophe which led to the extinction of dinosaurs from the surface of earth. Then coming to the Cenozoic era, which is the latest era in which we are living, it started about 63 million years ago. The birds developed, the birds evolved from the reptiles. The missing link Archaeopteryx shows the characteristics of a bird as well as a reptile, suggesting that birds has evolved from reptiles. From the birds evolved mammals. The first mammal was shrew-like, small in size. and the mammals have been since then dominating the surface of earth after the reduction of reptiles, because they are viviparous, they have good sense and they could avoid danger. In South America, the ancestral forms of horse, hippo and bear has been found. This shows that these these mammal forms also started originating at this time. Then you must be knowing about continental drift. The theory of continental drift suggests that the earth had a single land, and that single land, because of the tectonic plates and movement of the earth, they got separated, and because of which the continents which we see today have been formed. South America joined North America, Australia got separated. The fauna of the South America was overcome by the North American fauna, and the island Australia also got separated, because of which we can see many different kind of evolution. A parallel evolution is seen in marsupial mammals in Australia. The marsupial mammals are very much similar to the placental mammals in appearance, but they are different in their reproductive mechanism. Marsupials have a pouch, and the babies they produce are not fully developed, so they take more parental time inside their pouches to help them develop. The mammals also show a varied range of habits. They can be terrestrial, they can be aquatic, they can be aerial. You can see here the pictures: panda, tiger, elephant, whale, dolphins. These all are the example of mammals. So, I think I have given you a brief account of evolution, how the things progressed right from the beginning. Now, let us go to the next topic, which is the origin and evolution of man. We are very much interested in knowing about ourselves. So, let's trace the evolutionary changes which took place in man. 15 million years ago, the primates, the order Primata comprising of the primates, there were two types of ancestors we believe in. One was Dryopithecus and the other was Ramapithecus. Dryopithecus was hairy, ape-like, and we believe that most of the monkeys, gorillas, they have evolved from Dryopithecus, and Ramapithecus was more man-like. You can see Ramapithecus and Dryopithecus here. Ramapithecus was more man-like, and it is believed that it was our ancestor. Fossils of man-like bones were discovered in Ethiopia and Tanzania in Africa, suggesting that we all have come from Africa. Our ancestral origin lies in Africa. 3 to 4 million years ago, man-like primates were found in Eastern Africa. How did we find about them? We found about them by the fossils, and these fossils can be related to the time period. Hominid features, human-like features were seen in them. They were 4 feet tall and they could walk upright. Australopithecine was the next link in the evolution of man. It was fruit eating, hunted with stone weapon. Then in this period, about 1.5 million years ago, Homo habilis was seen to originate, and now the brain capacity also was seen to develop. It had 650 to 800 cranium capacity. Homo erectus was the next one to evolve. It had 900 cc, 900 cranial capacity. It ate meat, and the fossils were discovered in Java. 1 lakh to 40,000 years back, the Neanderthal man was discovered. It had a huge brain capacity of 1400 cc, and it was found in East and Central Asia. This shows that having been originated from Africa, now man started diversifying himself into different continents. 75,000 to 10,000 years back, there are Homo sapiens, which is the modern man. We come under Homo sapiens. 18,000 years ago, they arose in Africa and spread across continents. Prehistorical cave art developed. Now the Homo sapiens, they started developing art and different skills. 10,000 years ago, agriculture started, and finally settlement, and everything which occurred is the development process which we see in this world today. So, this is the entire sequence of the evolution of man. The important things have been written in violet color. You have to remember their names: Dryopithecus, Ramapithecus more man-like, then Australopithecine, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Neanderthal man, Homo sapiens. This sequence is enough. Along with certain features you have to mention about their brain capacity, about their dietary preference and all. So, now we have covered all the topics of our which were left. So, let us summarize. What we have learned today. In today's session, we learnt about the concept of species and speciation, Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium and the 5 factors which affected, a brief account of evolution and the origin and evolution of man. Let us discuss the questions which I gave you in the last session. Explain antibiotic resistance observed in bacteria in light of Darwinian selection theory. I hope these questions were quite clear from the last sessions and you could have you were able to answer them. Antibiotic resistance observed in bacteria in light of Darwinian selection. By the use of continuous antibiotics, those variants which could resist the effect of antibiotics are being selected by the nature as per the Darwin theory, and this is how we can explain this question. Second question, you can do it for yourself so as to increase your curiosity and your inquisitiveness. The third question is about the clear definition of the term species. If you followed the instruction today, you would be able to define what is a species. A species is characterized by the property of interbreeding. One example of adaptive radiation, you have learnt about the Darwin's finches, you have learnt about the marsupial radiation. These are the examples of adaptive radiation which you can write when the question comes. The remaining question, species. The species can be described as a potentially interbreeding group of individuals that are reproductively isolated from other population. Then trace the various components of human evolution. We have done so and I hope it is quite clear and you will be able to write this answer. Can we call human evolution as adaptive radiation? Think about it. No, we cannot call human evolution as an adaptive radiation because human evolved into and went to other places and there were other factors like mutation, genetic drift, migration, genetic recombination, but still human remains to be a single species. There is no division or bifurcation or lineages of this species, so we cannot say it to be as adaptive radiation. Trace the evolutionary stage of an animal horse. We can briefly describe about the evolutionary stages of horses. Eohippus which was found in North America was 60 million years ago. It was the size of about a fox and had 4 toes. It was very small in size, the horse. Then came the Mesohippus which was about 40 million years ago. It was the size of a goat and had 3 toes on each feet. So, we will be observing that its size is decreasing over a period of time and the number of toes on the foot is declining in order to give it the present form. Merychihippus which arose 35 million years ago, it was the size of an ass and could run on 1 toe. Then came the Pleohippus which is about 20 million years ago, and then the modern horse Equus which is 5 lakh years ago, and Equus has 1 toe on each forefoot and hind foot. So, this is the way the horse evolved over a period of time. Now, let us evaluate. These questions I have selected for you in order to develop a confidence that after following these 3 sessions, you will be able to successfully clear the entrance examination. If any question from this topic comes, you should be confident enough to solve them. These questions have been taken from past year entrance examination papers. Homologous organs indicate convergent evolution, parallel evolution, common descendant. Yes, you are right. Homologous organs indicate common descendant. One of the important consequences of geographical isolation is, what can be the important consequence? We have studied that geographical isolation leads to a barrier resulting in reproductive isolation and formation of a new species. So, the D option is right here, speciation through reproductive isolation. Next question, what is meant by Darwin fitness? the ability to survive and reproduce? I told you that fitness essentially meant reproductive fitness. If an organism is able to adapt and increase its offspring, increase its progeny, then it is said to be fit. So, the A option is right here, the ability to survive and reproduce. What is common to whale, seal and shark? Whale is a mammal, seal is also a mammal, but shark is a fish. So, all of these are living in one common habitat, that is water. So, we can say that all these are showing convergent evolution. D is the correct option, convergent evolution. Chemical reactions could have converted simple organic compounds into dash for the origin of life. I told you about the theory of chemical evolution, where we saw how simple organic compounds got converted into macromolecules. So, the correct option is D, macromolecules. With this, I hope that I was able to give you a holistic view of this chapter. And if you remember, in my introductory session, I gave you certain questions. The first question was, what is life, how did it originated, and what lies ahead. With these sessions on evolution, session 1, 2 and 3, which completes your chapter 7 evolution of class 12th NCERT, I hope that you are now in a better position to understand what is life, how it originated, and you can use your imaginative and creative faculties to think what will happen in future. With that note, I thank you very much.